It's a very technical thing.
I like that. Lights, camera, action.
Yeah. This is the Peter Greenwood Show at the Fringe, and this is one of those things where I get kind of nervous about because I'm sitting next to an actual podcaster. Could you tell me your name and what you do, please, sir?
Of course, my name is Stachini. I'm a comedian and podcaster, and I'm at this year's Edinburgh Fringe with my show Grenade, and we've just finished, as we were talking about before we got on camera and on mic, the All Made Up podcast, which we've done for 2 weeks of live shows at the Fringe, which was great.
Which we will get to. We will get to that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
Oh, no, not at all, not at all. Let's start with Grenade.
Yeah.
Where did that show come from? What's its origin story?
Okay, so the show is centred around family, relationships and honesty in a nutshell, and the theme is just honesty and how that looks in family, in relationships, and in just other parts of your life, right, and how you kind of deal with it. So a grenade, which is the metaphor for the show, is a problem in your life that you know you should be dealing with and you don't, and if you pull the pin on it, it can have disastrous effects because it's honest, you know what I mean? And honesty can be quite explosive. And it wasn't something that I sat down and was like, right, I've got to have a catchy title for the show. When I was talking about what my grenade had been, it just came out in conversation. I was like, what are you meant to do with this situation? Because that's a grenade. And as soon as I said that, I thought, in fact, that's the title. So without giving too much away, I examined relationships quite heavily when I look at like my mum and dad and how relationships can shift and change, and the level of honesty that people have within relationships. Because, by the way, can we swear on this?
Absolutely, yeah. Swear as much as you like.
Not that I'm too blue, but I think the idea of there's some people that will happily sit in shit because it's easy than it is to leave.
Yeah.
When I look at that through the lens of my parents, there's loads of laughs in it, and lots of people relate to it. I've had people at the end of shows coming up to me being like, I think I have a grenade in my life. And it doesn't have to be in your relationship. It could be in your job. It could be in your family. It could be in whatever area of your life. It's just that thing you know you should be dealing with, but you go, I'm just going to carry this. But you can't carry a grenade forever because it's a fucking grenade.
Sooner or later it'll go.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll do what a grenade was made to do.
Yeah. So the show kind of is centred around that, and it was something which I put together over the last 18 months, 2 years, and I previewed it last year at the Fringe, and it responded well. I was in the Waverley Bar, and I got the show together, and then I've made a few more tweaks to it, and I've come to the Fringe this year, and we've had 9 sellouts on the bounce. So,
which is a pretty good accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it so far, and if anyone asks, I'm in a 500-seater. All right.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, 60 seats is like I was happy if I'd sold out 1 or 2. You know what I mean? But it just seems we had my day off yesterday, and we're back on it today. So if that can carry on, if I get my 10th one today, I'll be buzzing.
That must be quite a cool experience to come up and be like, yes, I have sold this out.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of them where you are. There's a good team around me, so I've got my agent, my mate Lewis, who's fantastic. He helped me produce the show, and
if you're listening, hello Lewis.
Oh, Lewis,
and
is great.
Why wouldn't you be?
Yeah, no. So there's a good team. You've got Brett, Lewis, Ben, Clem. Even my girlfriend was up for a period of time. She was out flyering the show, and that's great. But having that tribe of people around you. You've been to the Fringe many a time.
Mm-hmm.
There's thousands of people here, but it can often feel like quite a lonely place to be. So when you've got that little tribe around you, when you've got good days, you can celebrate it. But even days when you maybe had a bit of a kick in the teeth, there's an element of you don't get bogged down in it because you're laughing about something else in 2 minutes' time. So yeah, I'm very thankful for them people this year, and I definitely think that has contributed towards the 9 sellouts we've had. So long may it continue.
Long may it continue.
Yeah, I felt like that was a long answer to a short question for me.
That's exactly what we need. Just
okay.
Talk as much as you like.
Right.
I want to ask a little bit about reactions to the show, because you said it was about your parents and whatnot. Have they seen it? How did they react to it?
Yeah. So my mum and dad both seen the show, really enjoyed it, and I think this is a thing that is different because, have you got many siblings and stuff like that?
I've got a couple of siblings, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Now, I make a joke sometimes about the fact that there's some people that wouldn't last 2 minutes in my family WhatsApp because the tone of my family is incredibly honest, and honesty is like a new pair of shoes. At times it can pinch.
Yes.
But because we all it's very sink or swim in our family, and a lot of people can swim. So there's a loving playfulness, but if you are being a tit, you will be told.
Yeah.
And it's not a case of you should stop doing that. It's stop being a knob.
Yeah.
And that's probably quite a PG version for the viewer or the listener. So when my mum and dad watched the show, and I'm basically holding a mirror up to what I saw their relationship when I was a kid. They laughed. They said it's interesting that you notice things that young, because one of the lines I have in the show, as I say, they were great parents but a terrible couple, which they were. And seeing that unfold, it's like both incredibly dishonest with each other, but incredibly honest with me and my sisters, because I'm the youngest of 4. I've got 3 older sisters. So very honest with all of us as we were growing up. And their response to the show hasn't been like, you can't say this, or, you know, I think audience members at times are surprised at the tone of which my family talk to each other in. But, you know, that's why you're not in the WhatsApp group. So
yeah. There is something about family, though, that if my sister calls me a dick, it's fine. But if somebody else calls me a dick, it's like, let's fucking get them.
Yeah.
Like, family looks after each other, but they're also not afraid to roast the shit out of you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, like, if anyone in my family saw the show and went, look, you can't say that, or that's not right, or anything like that, you know, I would take heed of it. I wouldn't be like, well, you're wrong, because you know you got your circle and you value the opinion of that circle, but they haven't. You know what I mean? It's like everyone's laughed, and I think the good thing is as well, and I think with doing stand up is you got to kind of take the rough with the smooth, and having that element of like just being able to laugh at yourself. I think from quite a early age, just because of the environment that my family kind of lived in, albeit very loving, but again very, very honest. Like, you know, you kind of you get a thick skin quite quick. So yeah, if someone was like upset about something, I'd be like, well, it's fine. You know what I mean? That's your opinion on that. The people in my circle are going, this is fine. So, you know, thankfully they've not said you can't put this in.
Which must be a great relief.
Yeah, 100%. It's my mum. There's a joke in the show about my mum, which when she saw it for about 50 seconds, was just howling at the back. And I said that in the show. I'm so glad she laughed at that, because you know my mum is my dad's a very larger than life character, and my mum is equally very larger than life, but they're like different, you know, in so many different ways. But my mum. She was married once and she's been engaged 4 times. Right. So I kind of just explore how that happened, you know, in a way that a son probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
But you know, my mum, she's like, that's hilarious. So it's just different. But then I don't know. I think the type of comedy that I enjoy watching is stuff that's really honest and personal, like Richard Pryor. Mm-hmm. He's like one of my favourites for that reason. You know, a guy that's going on talking about the fact that he grew up in a brothel. Yeah. You know, and he had to go and pick the stick that his grandma was going to go and hit him with. Like, I wasn't getting hit by any sticks, and nor did I grow up in a brothel. But that's not necessarily like a knock joke or a joke. You know what I mean? It's an experience which he's then making light of. Yeah. And that's the thing where I'm like, that's the type of comedy I want to do. You know, not that it's a case of not being mainstream, but yeah, personal stuff I think people relate to, and I think that's why the show so far has had the kind of, you know, the run it's had, because people are going, I'm relating to this.
Which is an important part of life, when you can look back on your childhood and be like, hey, this was kind of fucked up. Like, at the time, I accepted it as reality, but that's fucking weird. What happened there? And you talk about it with family, and it becomes a whole thing.
Yeah, well, I think so if I look at my mum and dad as an example of how a relationship should be, in my head, I'm like, you gave me every example of how to not have a relationship, so I'm not going to fall into that, and I'm going to do this. You know, and it doesn't mean that, you know, when 2 people get married, they're not thinking one day we're going to get divorced. Yeah. But, you know, people make mistakes, people change, things always change. And, yeah, when you know there's a decision to be made, the longer it takes, the moment you realise you've got to make a decision and the point you make the decision, suffering is that's when it occurs, in that space in between. Yeah, and I look at my parents and I'm like, I'd say for 10 years you just sucked the life out of each other in a way which, you know, we could have all had a better holiday had you just been like, do you know what, you can have a week with me and a week with your dad. But yeah, that's the type of stuff that I enjoy, and I think that's why crowds are relating to it, because, you know, there's relationships are universal. But I had a guy who came to watch the show that afterwards was like, he said, I think I've got a grenade in my relationship. And I was like, fair enough, mate. I don't think I'm the person you should be telling, but yeah.
Did you give him advice to pull the pin, or
No. The show isn't about that. It's not a case of me saying this is what you should do. And I was very aware when I was putting it together to be like, I didn't want it to be preachy, and nor is it like a celebration of something. I'm throwing something out there for you to play with. You know what I mean? It's like just think about this, because equally as my mum and dad would never tell me this is what you should be doing with your life. My mum and dad are like, we want you to be happy, we want you to enjoy something, but like just do something you really care about. And I think whether that be a career or a relationship, you've got to know why you're doing it. It's got to be the right reasons. And I think sometimes, how am I trying to phrase this? Safety is far more attractive than happiness.
Yeah.
Because it's like safety is reliable, and happiness can be quite fleeting. But then, we'll know people in our own circles that are in bad relationships for a long time, and you're like, why don't you leave? And they're like, well, it's harder than you think. And it's like, well, it might be, but at the same time, like, your day-to-day is rubbish.
Yeah.
And some relationships don't have to just be toxic for you to leave. It's just like sometimes they just run their course.
Yeah.
But, you can sit in it for a long time if you want.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the podcast.
Yeah. By the way, there's a lot of laughs in this show.
Yes, it's very funny. It's a comedy show.
It is a comedy show, yeah. I'm not going to be handing out pamphlets at the end. Right?
Like, if you've been affected by this,
yeah,
call.
Exactly.
Yes, let's talk about the podcast. Can you tell us its title and who you do it with?
Yes, so I host the All Made Up podcast with comedians Lewis Coleman and Ben Hart. And how it works is, it is a writer's room. So we have a guest that joins us in the writer's room. The guests we've had on in the past have been like Daniel Sloss, Jason Byrne, Connor Burns, other comedians without the second name Byrne. We've had loads. 60 episodes. Now I think 65th episode came out today.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. With Pete Heat, who we just watched. He's performing in the Pleasance Dome. Very funny guy. Good magician as well. Go and watch him. But yeah, so the guest joins us in the writer's room. They're the lead writer, and then we have 3 pots, which give us a start and an end, and then some curveballs in between. But how we get from the start to the end is when the magic happens, because we have about half an hour. And we've done 2 weeks of live shows up here with the audience act as a bit of a think tank. So, if we were to flesh out a character with the guests at the start, we'd say, what's their name? They give us a name. How old are they? The audience might give us their job, kind of maybe what their one goal is in life. And then, we just start moving from there. So it's different every time, hence why it's called All Made Up. But it's available on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, everywhere. And we've got listeners like all over the place. What I find mad about podcasting, and you probably find the same with this, so I've been doing stand-up 10 years properly, right? Or 10 and a half years now. So if I gig all over the country and, you do shows in Europe and stuff like that, we've been doing this podcast for just over a year, and like we have regular listeners in Argentina. And I'm like, I've never been to Argentina.
Yeah, how does it get there?
Yeah, exactly. But, in our head, we're like, there's some lads in Buenos Aires who buzz off the podcast.
Yeah.
And I find that crackers. But that's the great thing about podcasts, isn't it? Because I don't know whether them lads, they might be listening to this now,
Yep.
Whether they're driving a taxi, I don't know, cutting hair, whatever. It could be on in the background. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's a very passive source of media.
Yeah.
And I think the nice thing with All Made Up is, because it's not newsy, it's not opinionated, it's not like this is how the world should be, and you're also not bringing guests on that have to talk about themselves. So whether if let's just say like Daniel Sloss, if he's been on 4 podcasts, I imagine he's probably repeated some similar things.
Yeah.
But when he's on ours, he's coming up with a story about a woman who is a scientist that married a man called George Hitler.
George what, sorry?
George Hitler, you heard me right? Yeah.
Okay.
He took her second name, and she is convinced that he is a direct descendant of Adolf Hitler, and goes through an investigation to find out if that is true. And there are twists, turns, and D&T all along the way. And yeah, it's a good story, but when we sat down, I thought, there's no way this is coming out, and it did.
Yeah, I imagine, as you said, I imagine Sloss does get asked a couple of things, but he's not going to have that experience, which is the good thing about being a comedian doing a podcast like that, I imagine. Yeah,
definitely, because you've got the it's the playfulness of it, and if you were our guest one day, we're all in the same boat, so we're not just being like, right, Peter, give us the episode. You know, we're your assistants, so we'll make offerings, and all you do as a lead writer is go no or yes, and then you might go, well, I want to do this instead. But the entire time is like we are supporting you along the way. But while we've been up here doing the live shows, I mean, wow, we've had some people in that have got so involved that we were like, all right, pal, just. But that's,
maybe we'll have you on. Calm yourself.
Yeah, well, how I've described it to people is like if you imagine a pub quiz, but you're all on the same team.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's quite a nice feeling. So the idea is in a perfect world, we do it to 300 people in a live room. We have a projector. We could even have like actors come out and do act outs on stage. We do loads of act outs ourselves, which are always a good laugh. But yeah, there's like worlds within worlds that you create. So I'm trying to think. There's loads of episodes, but Mickey Bartlett's was very good. Last year when we came to the Fringe, we were breaking into student accommodation and recording there. So when students were trying to do their revision, we were like, off you go, pal. We're putting mics on here and we're recording.
The kitchen's closed, bog off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, we're recording in a lounge area here, and there are a few people around having meetings. But if this was the All Made Up podcast, I'd be like, you got to go.
Yeah. I want to ask about, because you said this episode won't come out, and it came out, and it did well. Let's talk about some of the things that people suggest, or guests have suggested, that maybe you haven't been able to put out. That must be good and bad as well. Like some fantastic outtakes, I imagine. Yeah,
it's not necessarily from the guests, from the audience, more so from the guests. So, you know, some of the lads that I work with have still got jobs in other areas of life at the moment. So, career-wise, there might be some clips which are very funny, but I imagine HR would be like, we've got an issue. So you just, you know, you pick and choose your battles. But I think the great thing with podcasts is, and I think this is what TV is really struggling with right now, is TV doesn't really know what it's doing. Because if, say for instance, Have a Word podcast is the biggest podcast probably in the country right now. It makes a huge amount of money. I don't want to say the figure just in case anyone's like, but it makes a huge amount of money.
Or anybody's like, give us a tenner.
Yeah. But they have 27,000 Patreons, right? So if you've got 27,000 people paying minimum £3 a month to watch your content, you kind of, you know, you're the master of your own fate, and you can say what you really want. And it's not a case of it being like, stop the boats, because it's not that. But sometimes what you can get away with in a comedy club on a Friday night in a low ceiling room with no windows is very different to what you can get away with on Live at the Apollo. Very different, because everything's kind of censored and it's got to be mainstream. And I think, going back to your point of has anything been taken out yet, there's bits and pieces which have been like really funny, but we're a bit like at the point where we go, this just might be stuff we can release behind a paywall later down the line, and if people want to watch it, they can. But if you're paying something, if you're supporting something and you're taking offence to something within it that's kind of, you know, none of it is like racist, homophobic or anything like that, but there are moments where you'd say something and you would laugh, but you'd be like, there's no way that get on telly. But the guests we've had on are always come away going, that was so much fun, because you're playing around for an hour, you know. It's like being a kid again. And we've got an idea to come back to the Fringe next year and basically do kid shows. But
that'd be fun, because kids say some really weird things.
Oh yeah, well I used to work in a school, and like kids are probably the most honest people you will meet, because they've got no censor, you know what I mean? They've not been battered by life.
Yeah, they haven't been told, you can't say that.
Yeah, exactly. So it just comes out. So yeah, we're going to do some kid shows and package that up in the future, because we're excited to kind of spread it as wide as we can. But the guests we've had on haven't been unbelievably rude, and some of the stories have got like really like quite good moral, you know, almost like poetry within them. And it's amazing how you can find like meaning in complete nonsense.
Yeah.
But you know, I suppose there is always the Bible. So
you're not wrong.
Yeah. There you go.
I want to ask a little bit about something which you mentioned there, because comedy is so subjective.
Yes.
And something you touched on there is that what's said in a comedy club may not hit outside of that context. And do you remember a few years ago when everything that every comedian said, it still happens today, everything every comedian says comes out, and it's like, this is not in context. That must be difficult as a stand-up comedian. How do you find that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes with the territory. and like it's happened while I've been here in one of my shows. I think so. I think the idea of watching a show on a Friday night in a comedy club, right? It's if you go into a comedy club, you're making an agreement that what's happening in the room is staying in the room.
Yeah.
Okay. And my kind of issue is, and this has probably been spoken about so many times in different ways, but you could watch someone for 20 minutes usually on a club night, right? And you could love 18 minutes of it, absolutely pissing your pants. And then there's one subject they hit, and it doesn't matter what they've said 18 minutes before that. You're like, well, that is what now defines you. And it's like sometimes you can just say things on stage for this, and not 100% believe it. But if you are choosing to pick out this thing and be like, well, I'm hanging on to that now, then in my head I'm like, well, the game's not for you. You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean you have to like tear that person down. Don't get me wrong, if someone's up there and they're being like extreme for the sake of being extreme, but like take for instance Frankie Boyle, unbelievable comedian, really funny, and he has one of the best jokes I've heard on an old album of his where he says I think we should stop raising money for cancer, right? And if you heard that in a room,
you'd go, what?
Yeah, you'd be a bit like, okay, ooh, there'd be that. And he goes, no, I think what we should do is, right, all the money we raise, we use it to build a massive water park, right? So when the doctor says, look, I've got good news and I've got bad news, and he says, and the good news is you don't know how fast you're going down a slide with no hair. Now that is a very funny joke, right? Because it's got the visual, it's aerodynamic, it makes sense.
Yeah.
All these things, it's like tick, tick, tick. But there'll be people that hear that and they'll be like, well, he's made a joke about cancer. And it's like, you've not liked the subject. It's the joke was good, but you've not liked the subject.
Yeah.
So I think, circling back to that previous point about podcasts, if you have an audience, like Have a Word Do, you're getting, people would rather see that than watch you on 8 out of 10 Cats or Live at the Apollo and stuff, because they're getting a kind of a rawer,
yeah,
you know what I mean, a rawer version of you, and that's just the way it is. But then, in my head, I imagine TV is going to have to kind of pivot in a way, because you're getting people that have now got like their own stations, you know what I mean, in YouTube and TikTok and stuff like that, and it's like, but if I can make, let's just say, $100,000 a year, just pulling that figure out of thin air on Instagram, why would I then go and do Live at the Apollo for $15,000?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially when that set will be cut down and butchered and minced and put through the machine. Yeah.
So it's just, but for audience members going to a club, I think you've got to kind of say to yourself that for the next hour, what happens in this room stays in this room.
Yeah, you're paying your money, you're taking your chance.
Yeah, and the same with like the Fringe. There's material in my show where my family are Catholic, and I kind of I rib the Catholics, and I know that some people really buzz off that, and I know that even my family people laugh about it, but then I know other people that are a bit like, it's distasteful, and it's like, well, it's distasteful to you, and that's your opinion, and that's fine. But yeah, I'm not gonna lose sleep over it.
Yeah.
Because it comes with the territory.
Yeah, that's the thing, is everyone now has a way to voice their opinion, and everyone thinks their opinion is the opinion to follow. Yeah,
but that's like it with anything. Hello. Yeah, are you doing? You okay? Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm good, sir. Thank you. We did Pick of the Fringe the other day. We have an actress just walked past me, and this is crackers, right? So when we're doing Pick of the Fringe, my second name is Stachini, right? And the original second name of my original spelling of my second name is Stachini, so it has an O in front, right? And I can't remember his name, but we were chatting backstage, and he said, "Your second name's Stachini?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "My son-in-law, his second name is Stachini."
Right.
And I was like, that's interesting. And he said, what part of Italy are you from? And I said, right in the north. And he said, yeah, so's my son-in-law. But you got lost in translation years ago. And I thought, maybe I might be related to your son-in-law. But how spooky is that?
What a small world.
Yeah, I think it was him. I'm pretty sure. But he looked like him. Yeah. But going back to that point of like offence and kind of how do you deal with that? I think you just take your lumps where they come, and you just move on with it. But yourself, if you're putting something out that is like shock factor and low-hanging fruit, and I don't feel like the things that I've got in my material is that, because I wouldn't, it's not the type of comedy that I'd pay to watch, so I'm like, why would I pay to do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I watched Amos's Gill show. Amos Gill, you know,
Yep.
at the Underbelly the other night, and his whole show was about being cancelled. Fantastic show, but like the material in it was so good and tight. But you're watching him go up, and you know he's being very true to what he thinks and what he feels. But yeah, I was sat with my girlfriend at the time, and she was. I thought, oh, she might be ruffled by a few of the things he's saying. She was like, no, that was hilarious. And it's like, I think if it's done well, it doesn't matter what you say. You've done it well. But if you're going up there and just being like cheap about it, then people will be like, all right, mate, think about it a little bit.
Yeah. And that's exactly what, I mean, again, an opinion. My thought about it is that if you go into shock, then there's only so long you can do that for. Like, you need to be able to back it up by telling stories or making some kind of point, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I'm trying to think of routines that I've seen where I'm like, that's a very good routine. There's a joke in Amos's show, but I don't want to give it away because he's obviously performing it. Yeah. It was one of them where as soon as he started it, you were like, ah, and then 10 seconds later, you're like, ha, and you know that's the clever thing about stand-up, and I think as well, stand-up can be a very good mirror to like the state of the world, and his sometimes that idea of going, well, you because you're this person, you can't touch this subject.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not too sure about that. I think anyone can talk about anything if they can articulate it. And I know what my strengths are, and I know what my weaknesses are, and I'm like, I'm not newsy, so I don't talk about the news. You know what I mean? I find religion a funny topic because I think religion is just funny. Like the thing about, I don't, shit on anyone for being religious, and I wouldn't push my opinion upon people. But I think the interesting thing about belief in general is that a belief doesn't have to be true. You just have to believe that it is. And when I examine that, like looking at Catholics and things like that, and the Bible in general, you know, like nativities, I've got a routine about that and what it's like when you're at school. But then if I took it to the most extreme fashion of what a nativity could look like, that's where the comedy is for me. And I've done it in clubs up and down the country, and people have buzzed off it. And I've done it in some shows here where people are a bit like, they laugh, but I go, you're not the crowd for this.
It's like a polite golf laugh, like, ha.
Yeah, well, it's. I think they're almost a bit like, ooh, and I go, you've got enough evidence to back it up to go, I've done this enough to know that it works.
Yeah.
But the difference with the Fringe is not a comedy club. It shows comedy, but comedy clubs are a different arena.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, different parts of the country have different sense of humour. I would say it's harder to gig outside of London than it is in London, purely from a point of view of like the people want things a bit faster. Mm-hmm. And you're in different types of rooms, like social clubs. You're in comedy clubs as well. Some amazing comedy clubs in the Northwest. You know, like you got the Stand in the Northeast. Even in Scotland and stuff like that. But there are amazing gigs in and around the Northwest, which happen in like cricket clubs, social clubs, pubs and stuff like that. But you can't go up there and do a 10-minute routine about Uber because people are like, we don't care.
Yeah.
You know, but then when you have all that experience and then you start doing gigs in London, I find the crowds in London are great, but they'll give you more time. They'll give you more grace because it's a bit more of an international crowd. So you've got to be a little bit, I suppose you can be, you've got to slow down, I find. I have to anyway. They're a bit more giving in a way that some places in like Wrexham aren't.
Yeah. Just different places in the UK.
Yeah.
Every place is different.
But I'm trying to think of like, there's some comedy clubs you go into where you can like feel a tension in the room, and you know that's no fun for anyone. But at the same time, you still got to be able to like deliver to it.
Yeah. And
Edinburgh is a different breed because you know there's people that have just taken a punt on your show. It's quite theatre-y at times. So you know I have a line in my show where I say I'm used to dealing with like cokeheads and drunks, and I'm like looking at you lot and I'm like you're covered in cashmere. You know, it's very like okay let's begin. But you have to roll with it.
Yeah. Where can people find out more about you and your show online? Oh, no rush. Take your time.
So you can find all my tickets for Grenade on the Underbelly website. It's at 5:45 at the Underbelly on Bristol Square. You'll also find it on the Fringe website as well. If you just Google Harry Stachini Grenade, I've got a website as well, which is harrystachini.com. Very convenient. And you can get the podcast at allmadeupod on Instagram. All my social media links are on my website, and the podcast is available on YouTube, everywhere else. It's well worth checking out. It's a good laugh. But yeah, I'm here until the 26th doing a split show, but my solo show. And as I say, if it sells out tonight, we've done 10 nights on the bounce, which will be amazing.
That's an accomplishment.
Fingers crossed.
And Stachini is spelled Stacini.
Stachini.
I forgot the H.
No, mate, even when I was a kid, I struggled with it. I had to learn a song to spell my second name.
Yeah, what song did you learn? Do you remember?
Oh God, there's a lot of people in it. Here we go. It goes Sutta a curly her it no I. So that's the song. And even now, when I've like filled in job applications in the past, I've sat there being like Sutta a curly her. No,
I do that as well, though, because my last name is Greenwood, so it's GREENWOOD.
Yeah. That's,
you make it up.
Yeah.
You do what you can to remember it.
Yeah, but I've had people say to me, Stachini a stage name? And I'm like, no, because it's difficult to spell and say.
Yeah.
So
it does look good on a poster.
Yeah, it does look good on a poster. I mean, it's I feel like Harry kind of lets it down at the start a bit, you know what I mean? With a second name like Stachini, you'd want something maybe like, I don't know, Louis, you know.
Brett
Stachini.
Brett Stachini?
Yeah, maybe I could see that.
That does sound like a dish at a restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take 2 lasagnas and 1 Brett Stachini, please.
Yeah, I like that. It would. I feel like it'd be quite a liquidy dish, you know what I mean?
Almost like a wedding soup.
Yeah,
not quite.
I'll take that. A wedding soup. I'll take that. But yeah, it's a good show. If you want to come check it out, I'd appreciate it. And please just check out the pod. But I've enjoyed this.
Thank you. It's lovely to have you. Lovely to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Harry Stachini Grenade is playing at Bistro Square at Underbelly at 5:45 until the 26th of August. For tickets, go to edfringe.com. My thanks to VC Toria A on Twitter, who produced this episode, and it was hosted by me, Peter Greenwood. Until next time, bye everybody, bye.